Lawyers of Reddit, what are some interesting laws loopholes? You can shoplift as long as the people working there can't speak English well enough to call the cops. There is no defense to statutory rape. If you pick up a girl at a bar, she shows you a fake ID, and her priest, parents, congressman, doctor, and President Obama walked in, shook your hand, and said she's legal and it turns out she's not legal. You're going to jail and a sex offender. Strict liability is nuts. I dunno. I always thought that was interesting crazy. You can't arrest a husband and wife for the same crime. Lawyer here. Most people don't know this. But if you have enough money and are white enough, I can get you off of pretty much anything. What if you are black but were really good at football? Then you just serve a quick novelty sentence to show the public that famous people can get in trouble too. In Canada it is legal to pirate movies, games, music apps as long as you don't make a profit from it. So if any Canadians here get a letter from their ICE telling them to stop, just ignore it. They can't do anything in court. We ignore it here in the US too. Once in a blue moon the recording industry will swoop down and duck over some poor schmuck's life up beyond reason as some kind of scare tactic for downloading an MP3 though. In Oklahoma, if you are an adopted child, you will be considered an heir of both your adoptive parents and your biological parents after their death. Double inheritance. Posting a sign saying you aren't responsible doesn't necessarily make you not responsible. For example, say a dry cleaning shop posts, "Not responsible for lost or damaged clothing." In South Dakota, if you ride a horse to school and the temperature is below a certain point, the school is forced to house and feed it. Under the Sexual Offences Act 2003 in the UK it's illegal to have sex with a live animal or to have sex with a dead human. An odd loophole to this wording is that there is therefore no law against having sex with a dead animal. It's also interesting to note that despite this, under the Criminal Justice and Immigration Act 2008, it is illegal to possess an image of someone having sex with an animal, dead or alive. Downloading CP and possessing CP is illegal. Viewing it is not. Possessing Drugus is illegal. Being on Drugus is not. Cops are never obligated to tell you the truth. In fact, lying is a potent law enforcement tool. If your keys are readily accessible to you, you can get a DUI even if the car is off and you are asleep. Go throw them in some bushes or stick them in the trunk. You can sign for someone else's credit card if you have permission. But use your name so it won't look like fraud. Banks can cash post-dated checks whenever they want. I work at a petrol station in the UK. If you fill up your car and walk into the shop without a suitable means of pay, forgot your cash, card doesn't work, we will give you an IOU form and you are not legally required to come back and pay the balance. We can send you a maximum of 3 letters and that's it. It would cost is more for court costs etc to get the cash off you. Sorry I ain't pertaining to ops lawyer answers but I thought you would find this useful. A major problem with EULAs, if I'm installing software for a client, and I click the agree on the software. What does that mean? I don't have power of attorney for any of my customers. Consider all the software that computer manufacturers and resellers and technical people install. And click OK on the EULA, without true legally binding representation. What? Then? Ian. And he found out that in Texas, if you brew the beer yourself you can legally consume it even if you are underage. You can even buy all the needed equipment while underage too. So there is this thing called jury nullification. I'm sure you've never heard of it on Reddit before. If you live in an oil producing state, odds are you don't own the rights to the oil under your land. However, the person who does own the oil rights is fully entitled to come on your land, set up a drilling rig, lay pipelines, install storage tanks, build a frack water pond, and do basically anything needed to get the oil out of the ground. They don't need your permission to do this. It is not trespassing. And there is virtually nothing you can do to stop them. Oil and gas lawyer. Edit, added qualifier. I regularly tell people there is no magic number on a DUI charge. While there is a legal DUI limit .08 in the states, above which you are automatically considered impaired so long as the reading is considered valid and admissible. Most states have laws which allow any amount of alcohol in your system to qualify for the charge if the state can show the amount, no matter how low, sufficiently impaired your ability to operate the vehicle. Here we have DUI, driving under the influence, and DWI, driving while intoxicated, as basically separate laws. The first requires a .08. The second requires a showing you were intoxicated to a point your ability was sufficiently lessened. Fun fact to throw out at the local bar: when someone starts talking about how they had 3 beers and are below the legal limit, and therefore won't get a DUI as a result. Any act followed by a verbal or written no homo comment is deemed to be true a priori. However, if ball sacks touched during the prior act, no homo cannot be used to invalidate said action. I read in a book once that there is an outdated law in Alberta that hasn't been changed. This was a few years back though, that if you are released from jail you can demand a loaded gun and a horse to ride out of town. Anybody know what happened to this one? Lawyer here. If you set off the alarm walking out of a retail store, just keep walking. The store personnel has no right to detain you unless they have an actual basis for doing so. For example, someone saw you taking stuff off the rack and putting it into your bag. Absent such cause, touching you could be civil battery, false imprisonment, and a host of other things. Have them call the cops, they'll say the same thing. Edit, this is the general rule and may not actually be the law wherever it is that you live and or shop. A previous US president has set the precedent that OBJ is not actually 6. So if you are ever caught by your significant other you have an out. This is not true anymore. But it once upon a time a husband could not be convicted of raping his wife. Also, a spouse used to be able to sue the person her spouse cheated on you with. It was called alienation of affections. If you're poor, then you automatically lose. I've always been fond of adverse possession. Although most state statutes have taken the bite out of the common law concept because of the nature of adverse possession. If you tell somebody to get off your land and they refuse, they remain in adverse possession. However, I once came across an academic argument which suggested that if you gave the person permission to stay there, the clock would stop running on the statute of limitations and their possession would no longer be adverse. In Tasmania, Australia's Alaska, the age of consent for sexy times, specifically penetration to the least degree of the vag, anus or mouth with a pen 15, is 17. Unless you're both over 15 and the age gap is less than 5 years. Or you're both over 12 and the age gap is less than 2 years. This applies to everything except NAL 6, for which you must be over 17, even if you're pitching. Also there's a defense if you honestly and reasonably believe the other party to be over 17 and they're not. But not for the age gap stuff. So if you honestly and reasonably believe them to be 16 and you are 17 and a half but they're actually just over 15, you're going to jail. Yes, I know a lot about sexual consent laws. What of it? There is a part of Idaho where you could commit a crime and the government would be constitutionally unable to charge you for it, though there are a bunch of caveats. The general gist of it is that the 6th Amendment guarantees a jury consisting of people who live in the district and state that the crime was committed. And no one lives in that district of Idaho due to the fact that it is part of Yellowstone Park. Also, I'm not a lawyer, so I probably wouldn't advise you all to head over there based on what I just said. You can legally marry your first cousin in ILF1. Either party is over the age of 55 and 2. They are sterile with a doctor's note stating such. You can marry your first cousin in Australia. No questions asked. The consumer grade license agreements are really about protecting the company from class action lawsuits. That is, they are not designed to ever go after the consumer, but to protect from the consumer. I'm not a lawyer but a paralegal in various capacities. You can pretty much claim anything as a work-related injury. If you get carpal tunnel for example, you can also say that your carpal tunnel causes you depression, anxiety and insomnia. If they're not disputing the carpal tunnel, they probably won't dispute anything else you add on. If they want to dispute it, they will have to pay for the doctor to prove you don't have depression, anxiety, insomnia, and they would rather just give you the money as part of your settlement. Also, wills and trusts are pretty fun. You can pretty much do whatever you want. It's like creating a little fantasy world for after you die, and everyone will be obligated to honor your wishes the best they can. When you pay to park somewhere, and they hand you that ticket that says they are not responsible for any damage to your car, that's bullshit. They absolutely are, and they just want to scare you off. They took a bailment on your car. Exceeding the posted speed limit in Texas and a few other states is not technically a crime. It's just really good evidence that you were speeding. It falls under the umbrella of prima facie law, which means on the face of things, speeding is loosely defined as driving too fast for the given conditions. So if you are going over the posted speed limit but driving safely according to a set of standards and conditions, you are not speeding. Good luck convincing a judge though, lol. If you begin a sentence with no offense, it is impossible for the person to be offended by the words coming out of your mouth. It's okay to dump DMSO down the drain in our lab as long as you dilute it with water, because the law says it has to be under a certain concentration to dump. But you're still dumping the same amount of DMSO. It's just not as concentrated.